I stood in my parents' lavish kitchen, the scent of freshly baked vanilla cupcakes filling the air, their golden tops gleaming under the warm glow of the chandelier. My mother, dressed impeccably in a navy silk blouse, hummed to herself as she carefully arranged them on a tiered silver display stand, a perfectionist. As always, more focused on aesthetics than reality. My father sat at the marble-topped island, sipping his espresso as if this were just another morning, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. The words they had just spoken still hung in the air like a knife poised to strike. "She deserves it more, honey," my mother had said, not even bothering to look up from her cupcakes, as if my pain was an insignificant footnote in her carefully curated world. "Jessica has always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests." My grip tightened around my medical school diploma, still encased in its sleek black leather frame. The weight of it felt different now, heavier, like an anchor dragging me down. Other interests? My mind raced, recalling the countless nights I had spent in the hospital library, hunched over research papers while Jessica had been on ski trips with our parents in Aspen. Had I imagined the sleepless nights? The endless rotations? The pressure that came with every exam? I took a slow breath, trying to steady the rage clawing its way to the surface. "Mom," I said carefully, my voice deliberately calm, though my hands trembled at my sides. "Jessica and I graduated with the same honors, the same GPA. We survived the same grueling 4 years of medical school together." I swallowed, searching their faces for any flicker of remorse, any hint that they realized how deeply they had cut me. "I don't understand why you and Dad paid off all of Jessica's loans but didn't even offer to help with mine." My mother sighed, not with guilt, but with exasperation. Finally, she met my eyes, her expression one of mild disappointment, as if I were a child whining over an unfair bedtime. "Audrey," she said, her voice cool and practiced, "your sister doesn't have a wealthy mentor like Dr. Parker looking out for her." She motioned toward my father, who nodded in agreement, as if what she had just said made perfect sense. "You've always had opportunities Jessica didn't." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Opportunities?" I repeated, disbelief crashing over me like a tidal wave. "You mean the research assistant position I earned after working 80-hour weeks in the lab? The opportunity I created for myself while you flew across the country to cheer Jessica on at volleyball tournaments?" My father finally spoke, his tone measured, as if he were speaking to a fragile patient in the emergency room. "No one is punishing you, Audrey. We're just being practical. Jessica needed the help more than you. You've always been more resourceful." There it was, the word they had always used to justify their neglect. Resourceful. The reason they never attended my undergraduate research presentations but flew to Jessica's sporting events. The reason Jessica got a brand new car for her 21st birthday, while I got a gas station gift card. The reason, now, that she was debt-free while I was drowning in student loans. My mouth felt dry as I forced myself to speak. "Tomorrow is Jessica's debt-free celebration party," I said, forcing a smile. "I suppose you didn't think it was worth mentioning to the guests that I also graduated from medical school?" My mother's lips pursed slightly. Annoyed, not remorseful. "Jessica's accomplishment is unique," she said, as if reading off a prepared script. "Not every young woman gets to enter the medical field without the stress of debt. That deserves a celebration." A slow, numbing realization crept into my bones. They genuinely believed this. They had convinced themselves that their favoritism was justifiable, even noble. I exhaled sharply, picking up my bag, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on my chest. "I need to head out," I said stiffly. "I have an early shift at the hospital tomorrow." My mother finally looked concerned. "But not for me, for Jessica's perfect evening. You'll still come to the party, won't you?" she asked, her voice suddenly softer, a calculated attempt at guilt-tripping. I forced a nod. "I'll be there." But as I walked out the door, my phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Parker, my research mentor. "Need to speak with you urgently about the Patterson Fellowship." Big news. I stopped cold, my heart pounding in my chest. The Patterson Fellowship, the most prestigious research opportunity in the country. A position awarded to only one graduating medical student nationwide. I turned my head slightly, looking back through the open doorway. My parents had already moved on, laughing about something trivial, Jessica's name slipping effortlessly from their lips while mine faded into the background. They thought they had the final say. They thought I would always be the shadow to Jessica's spotlight. But they had no idea what was coming. And this time, they wouldn't be able to ignore me. The moment I stepped into my childhood home, the weight of old memories pressed against my chest like an unbearable force. The walls were lined with framed photos, Jessica beaming with her volleyball team. Jessica holding up her first-place science fair ribbon. Jessica at her high school graduation in a gown almost identical to mine. Yet, I searched the room for a single picture that featured me alone. A moment where I wasn't just a supporting character in my sister's highlight reel. There were none. I should have known. I should have seen it for what it was. Growing up in Cleveland, Jessica and I had always been two halves of the same whole, twins. Yet treated as if we were entirely different species. She was the golden child. The one who made friends effortlessly. Who thrived in sports. Who shined effortlessly in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the one who buried myself in books. Who spent weekends in the library instead of at soccer games. Who worked tirelessly because I had no safety net waiting to catch me if I fell. My parents attended every one of Jessica's dance recitals, tournaments, and volunteer events. My own achievements, a first-place state science fair award, a published research paper in high school, were met with casual nods. A quick, "That's nice, Audrey," before they rushed off to something Jessica was doing. But medical school was supposed to be different. When Jessica and I both announced that we were going to pursue medicine, I thought, naively, that this was the moment my parents would finally see us as equals. That the years of imbalance would correct themselves. That their favoritism would fade in the face of our identical accomplishments. I was wrong. During our undergraduate years at Ohio State, I worked part-time to cover expenses while maintaining a perfect GPA. Jessica, on the other hand, struggled. Organic chemistry, physics, calculus, they all challenged her. But instead of letting her face those struggles, our parents hired the best tutors, paid for expensive prep courses, and when she failed the MCAT on her first attempt, they spent thousands of dollars enrolling her in an elite program to help her retake it. When I took the MCAT and scored in the 98th percentile on my first try, my mother barely reacted. "That's great, honey," she had said, barely looking up from her phone. "Maybe you can help Jessica study for hers." I should have seen it then. But I didn't want to believe it. Even during medical school in Michigan, the favoritism didn't fade, it intensified. When I was selected to present research at a national medical conference, my parents didn't even acknowledge it because that same weekend, Jessica received an award for community service. Guess which event they attended? When I struggled to pay rent because I was surviving off student loans and part-time research jobs, my parents covered Jessica's living expenses without a second thought. But for me, they always had the same response: "You'll be fine, Audrey. You're independent." Independent. That was their excuse. The word they used to justify neglecting me while pouring everything into Jessica's success. But the truth was, I had never been given a choice. I had to be independent. No one was waiting to save me if I fell behind. No one was covering my tuition when things got hard. No one was ensuring that I landed on my feet. Still, through it all, I never resented Jessica. She was my twin, my best friend, my other half. She hadn't created our parents' favoritism. She had just benefited from it. I wanted to believe that she understood, that she saw what was happening. But she never spoke up. She never once turned to them and said, "What about Audrey?" And that hurt more than anything else. We studied together for 4 years, supported each other through the grueling clinical rotations, pushed each other to succeed. I thought, finally, after everything, we were on the same playing field. But then the day came. The day my parents made it clear, once and for all, that no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I would never be enough. The day they paid off Jessica's medical school loans in full, and left me to drown in debt. That was the day something inside me changed. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't want their approval anymore. I didn't want their validation, their forced smiles, their empty congratulations. No, what I wanted was for them to see me, to recognize what I had done. Not because of them, but despite them. And they would. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that a storm was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one standing in the shadows. The weight of their decision crashed down on me like a suffocating wave. But the worst part wasn't even the debt, it was the realization that my parents had never truly seen me. Not once. Not through all the sleepless nights. Not through the years of clawing my way to success without their help. Not through the endless sacrifices I had made to stand exactly where Jessica stood. It wasn't about money. It was about worth. And to them, I would always be less worthy. I sat at my desk in my small apartment, staring at my bank statements. At the staggering total of my medical school loans, $236. Jessica's balance? Zero. The unfairness of it burned like acid in my veins. We had taken the exact same classes, passed the exact same exams, walked across the same stage at graduation. And yet, only one of us had been deemed worthy of a fresh start. I couldn't sit still. I stood up, pacing, my hands clenching into fists. How could they do this? How could they look me in the eye, call me resourceful, as if that justified abandoning me? As if my hard work meant I deserved to suffer while Jessica was gifted a debt-free life? I needed answers. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew the truth, I just needed to hear them say it out loud. So I called them. My mother answered on the second ring. Her voice light, happy, probably still glowing from their latest round of congratulations at Jessica's debt-free celebration party, the one they had thrown for her like it was some grand accomplishment. Audrey, honey, she chirped, are you on your way to the party? We saved you a seat. A seat. As if I was some distant relative. An afterthought. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My voice steadier than I expected. Mom, I just need to ask you something. Of course, sweetheart, but make it quick. Jessica's about to give a little speech. I squeezed my eyes shut. Of course she was. I took a deep breath. Why did you and Dad pay off Jessica's student loans and not mine? Silence. Then a soft sigh, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Oh, Audrey, sweetheart, you don't need our help. You've always been so independent. Independent. There it was again, that cursed word, the one they used to justify every time they had left me to struggle. Every time they had chosen her over me. I see, I said, my voice cold. So, because I didn't break down and ask for help, you assumed I didn't need it? Honey, it's not like that, she said, a note of impatience creeping into her voice. It's just that, well, Jessica has always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests. Other interests? I nearly laughed out loud. What she meant was that while Jessica had been skiing in Aspen over winter break, I had been working 80-hour weeks in the lab just to get by. While Jessica had been attending family-funded summer programs, I had been tutoring other students just to afford rent. But sure, let's call that other interests. You both graduated, my mother continued, as if that was some kind of justification. But Jessica had a harder time getting there. We wanted to support her because she needed us more. Needed us more. I was shaking, not with sadness, not even with rage, but with clarity. They weren't oblivious. They had known exactly what they were doing. They had seen the difference in how we struggled and had still chosen to tip the scales further in Jessica's favor. It had never been about need. It had never been about fairness. It had been about who they loved more. The revelation left me cold. I didn't even bother arguing. I simply whispered, I understand now. Then I hung up. For a long moment, I just stood there, the silence pressing against my ears. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again, a message from Dr. Fleming. We need to talk. Urgent news about the Patterson Fellowship. I stared at the screen. My heart pounding. The Patterson Fellowship. The most prestigious neurosurgical research fellowship in the country. A position awarded to only one graduating medical student nationwide. And I had applied. But could I actually dare to hope? I closed my eyes and took a breath. Maybe, just maybe, life was about to tip the scales in my favor for the first time. The air inside the grand, high-end restaurant felt thick with anticipation. The rooftop terrace, adorned with twinkling fairy lights and gold-trimmed banners, screamed celebration, but for only one of the two doctors in the family. I scanned the decorations, my stomach twisting. A giant banner read, "Congratulations, Dr. Jessica." No mention of me. No hint that two people had graduated from medical school. No sign that I had accomplished the exact same feat. I clenched my fists. I had told myself to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't my night. I had no place ruining Jessica's moment. And yet, deep down, I knew I didn't have to. Because something was coming. Something far bigger than any celebration my parents had orchestrated. I wasn't the only one who knew it. Across the room, Dr. Fleming stood near the entrance, scanning the party with a knowing glint in her sharp blue eyes. The moment she caught my gaze, she gave me a subtle nod, confirming what I already knew. Tonight wasn't just Jessica's night. It was about to become mine. Jessica spotted me across the crowd and rushed over, her silver cocktail dress glittering under the string lights. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, linking her arm through mine. "Aunt Patty keeps asking if I have a boyfriend. And Dad's introducing me to every surgeon in the room like I'm on some kind of job interview." I let out a small laugh despite myself. Jessica always made things seem effortless. But maybe, just maybe, she was as trapped as I was in this perfectly curated family dynamic. "It's all a bit much, don't you think?" she murmured. I turned to her, searching her face. Was that guilt in her voice? Before I could answer, our mother's voice rang out through the room. "Everyone, please gather around." I tensed as my father took his place beside her, champagne glass in hand. They were about to deliver their carefully rehearsed speech. And I was about to watch them rewrite reality once again. The crowd shifted, people turning their attention toward my parents. My father's voice was warm, proud, and perfectly measured. "Tonight, we gather to celebrate an incredible accomplishment. As many of you know, medical school is a grueling journey. It requires dedication, intelligence, and resilience." He turned to Jessica, his eyes gleaming. "And our brilliant daughter Jessica embodies all of that. She has worked tirelessly to get to where she is today. And we couldn't be prouder." Applause rang out, followed by a chorus of cheers. Jessica's expression faltered slightly. For the first time, I saw something new in her, discomfort. But my father wasn't done. He turned back to the crowd, raising his glass higher. "We were blessed to be in a position where we could support Jessica fully through her journey, ensuring that she could graduate without the burden of student loans. Because we believe in investing in her future." The words hit like a punch to the gut. There it was, the final confirmation. They hadn't just forgotten about me. They had deliberately excluded me from their version of success. The audience applauded again. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, looking between me and our parents. I could see it in her eyes now. She knew. She had known for a while, hadn't she? But she hadn't spoken up. She had let it happen. And before my parents could continue, before they could further cement their carefully constructed reality, Dr. Fleming took a step forward. And with one sentence, she shattered everything. "If I may," she said, her voice cutting through the applause like a blade. The room fell into a stunned silence. Dr. Fleming turned toward me with a knowing smile, then addressed the entire room. "There's actually another remarkable achievement that needs recognition tonight." I felt my breath catch. My parents stiffened. My father's grip on his champagne glass tightened. Jessica's eyes widened. Dr. Fleming didn't hesitate. "I am honored to officially announce that Dr. Audrey Collins has been awarded the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a wave of stunned silence. Then, slowly, applause. Real, genuine, thunderous applause. Jessica turned to me, her lips slightly parted. My mother's face went ghost white. And my father, for the first time in my life, looked speechless. Dr. Fleming continued, her voice filled with pride. "This is the most prestigious neurosurgical research fellowship in the country. Only one graduating medical student nationwide is selected each year. And this year, that student is Audrey." The attention of the entire room shifted. It wasn't about Jessica anymore. It was about me. Dr. Fleming wasn't done. In addition, the Patterson Fellowship comes with a full loan forgiveness package and a substantial stipend. Audrey will be graduating medical school completely debt-free, not through financial assistance, but through pure merit. I could feel every eye on me. For the first time, I saw respect in the faces of the relatives who had ignored me for years. I saw my professors nodding in approval. I saw Jessica looking at me not with jealousy, but with something else. Understanding. And my parents. I had never seen them so unprepared. So utterly, completely caught off guard. Dr. Fleming raised her glass. To Dr. Audrey Collins, one of the brightest minds in neurosurgical research today. The entire room lifted their glasses in agreement. To Audrey. And as I raised my own glass, I felt something deep inside me shift. For the first time in my entire life, I had won. The night had shifted. The grand rooftop celebration, once a tribute to Jessica's supposed unmatched brilliance, had taken an unexpected turn. And my parents? They were reeling. Their carefully curated reality had just been shattered in front of everyone. I sat at my table, my hands wrapped around the chilled stem of my champagne glass, watching as guests whispered behind their hands. I could feel the weight of their stares. Not on Jessica, but on me. I had become the center of attention. For once, for the first time, Jessica still sat beside me, her expression unreadable. My mother, on the other hand, was barely keeping it together. Her forced smile had frozen into something unnatural. And my father? His grip on his whiskey glass was so tight I half expected it to shatter. Across the terrace, I saw Dr. Fleming watching them carefully. She knew exactly what she had done. She had just exposed them in front of their peers, their friends, their precious connections, and they couldn't stand it. I took a sip of my champagne, my pulse still racing. My father suddenly stood, clearing his throat, his voice strained but composed. "Well now, this is quite a surprise," he said, attempting to chuckle. The sound was hollow. He glanced at my mother, who nodded stiffly before speaking in her usual calculated tone. "Of course, we're proud of you, Audrey," she said, her words as forced as her expression. "This is quite the achievement." Quite the achievement. That was all she could muster. Not a single congratulations, not even a smile. I could almost hear the wheels turning in their heads. How do we spin this? How do we regain control? Jessica, to my surprise, suddenly leaned forward. "That's it?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. Our mother stiffened. "What do you mean, dear?" Jessica's fingers tightened around her glass. "You threw me this huge party. You made a big speech about how proud you were of me. But Audrey wins the most prestigious medical fellowship in the country and all she gets is quite the achievement." The table went silent. Jessica shook her head, her frustration boiling over. "I don't know why I'm even surprised," she muttered, stabbing her fork into her untouched dessert. "This is what you do. You act like she doesn't exist until you can't ignore her anymore." My mother's smile finally cracked. "That's not fair, Jessica," she snapped. My father was fuming, his hand pressing against the table as if to steady himself. "This isn't the time for this," he said in a low, warning tone. But Jessica wasn't backing down. "No, this is exactly the time," she said, her voice rising. "You spent years making Audrey feel like she was second best. You barely acknowledged her work. And now that the entire world sees how incredible she is, you don't know what to do." Gasps rippled through the nearby tables. My mother's face drained of color. "Jessica," she hissed, "lower your voice." Jessica let out a short, bitter laugh. "Why? Because people might finally see the truth?" I stared at my sister, stunned. I had always assumed she was simply complicit, that she enjoyed being the favorite. But maybe she had been just as trapped in their expectations as I had. "And now?" She had enough. "I wanted to believe you were just trying to support me," Jessica continued, shaking her head. "But that's not it, is it? It was never about me being special. It was about keeping Audrey small, making sure she never outshined me. But guess what? She did. And she did it without you." My mother inhaled sharply. "Jessica, that's not." Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm done," she said. "I'm done pretending I don't see it. I'm done being part of it." She turned to me, her eyes filled with something raw and unfamiliar. "Regret. I'm sorry, Audrey," she whispered. Then, without another word, she walked away. The room was still. Then, slowly, applause broke out. It wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. But it was real. I looked around. Seeing the professors, the colleagues, the mentors, people who had truly seen me, even when my own family refused to. They were clapping for me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. My mother, trembling, turned to my father in a desperate, silent plea. But for once, he had nothing to say. He had lost control. And so had she. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I had spent years craving their approval. And now, I realized I didn't need it. I had never needed it. And that terrified them. The celebration was over. Or at least, it was supposed to be. The rooftop terrace had emptied out, save for a few stragglers lingering by the bar. The remnants of cake smeared across abandoned plates. The echoes of polite applause and murmured congratulations still hung in the air. But the weight of what had just unfolded pressed down on the space like an invisible storm. I had spent the entire night watching my parents unravel. They had tried to keep up appearances, forced smiles and empty words masking their embarrassment. But the moment Jessica walked away from them, from their control, from their carefully curated family image, something inside them had snapped. And now, it was just us. Me, my mother, my father, and the truth. You have some nerve, Audrey. My mother's voice was like glass, sharp, brittle, and dangerously close to breaking. I turned slowly, meeting her icy gaze. My father stood beside her, his lips pressed into a hard line. Their masks had finally slipped. Nerve? I repeated, my voice even. For what, exactly? For humiliating us, she hissed. For throwing a tantrum and ruining your sister's night. I let out a breathless laugh. Jessica's night? You mean the night that was supposed to be about celebrating both of us? Or the night where I was supposed to sit quietly while you acted like I didn't exist? My father slammed his drink down on the nearest table, the force rattling the glass. That's enough, he growled. But I wasn't finished. No, I said, stepping closer. It's not. It's never been enough. Nothing I've done has ever been enough for you. A muscle in my mother's jaw twitched. That's not true, isn't it? I shot back. You paid off Jessica's loans without a second thought. But mine? Not a single cent. You chose her. You always have. No matter what I did. No matter how hard I worked. You made sure I was always just a step behind. My mother's nails dug into her palm. Her posture stiff, as if she was physically restraining herself from lashing out. You've always been so dramatic, she said through clenched teeth. Jessica needed help. You had advantages she didn't. I finished for her, mocking the words she had repeated to me so many times over the years. Her face paled. Dr. Fleming? I continued, my voice thick with sarcasm. The research position I earned through actual hard work? The scholarships I secured because you refused to help me financially? The internships I took while Jessica was off vacationing on your dime? Are those the advantages you mean? Silence. Good. Because I wasn't done. I want you to admit it. I said, my tone lowering, the sharp edge of anger settling into something colder. My father scoffed. Admit what? That you were never going to support me the way you supported Jessica. I said, stepping closer, that no matter what I did, I was always going to be second place. The backup daughter, the one you could ignore. Because you knew I'd survive without you. My mother flinched. I saw it. For the first time in my entire life. I saw actual guilt flicker across her face. It was gone in an instant. Replaced by rage. But it was there. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I tilted my head. Then make me understand. She opened her mouth. But nothing came out. She had no answer. Because the truth? She knew I was right. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle between us. You can try to spin this however you want, I said quietly, but I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your money, your validation, or whatever scraps of affection you decide to throw my way when it's convenient for you. I straightened, lifting my chin. I have everything I need. And for the first time in my life, I see you for who you really are. My father let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. So, what? You're just going to cut us off? I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. I'm going to do what you've always done to me. I turned my back, and I walked away, leaving them exactly where they left me, in the past. The morning sun filtered through my apartment window, casting golden streaks across the half-packed boxes lining the walls. My flight to Baltimore was in less than 24 hours. Tomorrow, I would be gone. It should have felt like relief. Freedom, the final step away from everything I had left behind. But when I saw my parents' names flashing across my phone screen, an old, familiar weight settled over my chest. They weren't done. I let the call ring out, my hands tightening into fists as the voicemail notification popped up. A second later, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was Jessica. I hesitated. Then, with a sigh, I picked up. Jessica. Audrey, she said, her voice tight. Mom and Dad just showed up at my apartment. I stiffened. What? They're freaking out, she continued. I don't think they realized you were really leaving until now. Mom's crying. Dad's ranting about family loyalty and how you're abandoning them. I exhaled slowly. And what do they want me to do about it? They want you to meet them before you go, Jessica admitted. One last time. I closed my eyes. I could already picture it, my mother's tearful apologies. Carefully constructed to sound remorseful but never actually acknowledging what she had done. My father's thinly veiled threats wrapped in concern. The desperate attempt to pull me back in. I had spent 26 years waiting for them to change. I wasn't going to waste another second. I can't, I said simply. Jessica sighed. I figured you'd say that. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, she added, I'm proud of you. My throat tightened. What? You're doing what I should have done a long time ago, she said, choosing yourself. For a long time, I had convinced myself that Jessica didn't see it, that she was oblivious to the way our parents had shaped our lives. The unspoken hierarchy they had enforced. But maybe, deep down, she had always known. Maybe she had just been too afraid to say it. I know this doesn't fix things, Jessica continued, and I know I should have spoken up sooner. But I need you to know, no matter what Mom and Dad say, you were never less than me. Not once. I swallowed hard. I appreciate that, I murmured. She hesitated. Will I see you again? After you move? I don't know, I admitted. And for once, I wasn't lying. Jessica wasn't our parents. She had been complicit, yes, but she had also been a victim of their favoritism in a different way. I just wasn't sure if I could separate the two. A soft chuckle came through the receiver. Well, if you ever decide you want a sister again, let me know. I smiled, despite myself. Take care, Jess. You too. I ended the call and let out a slow breath, staring at the last packed box in front of me. This was it. This was the moment. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more looking back. I picked up my suitcase and stepped outside into the morning light, leaving my past and my parents exactly where they belonged.